don't know what Fathom is doing. So I just turn on the recorder for this too. So if I have to, we got that as a backup. So it'll
Okay.
be fine, I'm sure. Anyway, so Aaron, tell us everything there is to know about you.
Um, well, so I was born and raised in Muscatine, Iowa, which is a small town in southeastern Iowa. Kind of, you look at Iowa as a face, I always say Muscatine's the nostril um, of the state, which is
My
fitting
dad, my
because there's
dad,
several.
my dad lived in Muscatine for a while as a child, so I'm a little bit
Yeah,
familiar with it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's fitting with all the different smells from different companies. But um, was raised in a family that did not necessarily articulate faith in any meaningful way.
Hmm.
So Christmas was about Santa Claus, a little bit about Jesus' birth. That's about all we knew. And Easter was about the Easter Bunny, and I didn't know what Jesus had to do with that growing up. So going from that into undergrad, I fell into a community of faith and campus ministry. I had a couple friends from high school who were attending Northern Iowa and invited me to join them for worship at the Lutheran campus ministry. And came there a couple times. Had a friend who was very depressed and suicidal, and so really leaned on those campus ministers there to help me, to help him, but also help me articulate what a life of faith actually means.
Mm.
So it was a real joy to come into faith as a 20-year-old in campus ministry, or to find faith, I would say. I wouldn't say we come into it. It's kind of one of those things that God puts in front of us, right?
Hmm.
And come into that in that kind of a setting. Was baptized at the age of 20. Went on a mission trip to Guatemala right after that. Um, even kind of a funny thing, we was a part of a men's Bible study at that time, and we were studying Martin Luther's theology of Romans, his commentary on the Book of Romans. So that
Hmm.
was kind of my foray into Lutheran theology, was Martin Luther's commentary on the Book of Romans. Um,
That's a fairly hefty starting point.
it really was, but I enjoyed it a lot. I actually ended up changing my major from being in education, which is education's great. We should all be educators and teachers, but change that to humanities so I could take more theology, philosophy, religion, ethics classes, and so I felt like I was behind, a lot of
Hmm.
my peers who were, and I was very interested in the faith. So I kind of
Hmm.
fell in love with the faith while being kind of thrown into it at the same time.
Hmm.
Wonderful
Hmm.
thing there. Um, Kind of fast forward from there, I graduated and I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life. And so I was driving for an interview, it was about 100 degrees and dressed in a suit, driving for an interview at a after school kind of program. And my car stops working in front of the Wesley United Methodist Church in my hometown. And so, as you do when your car breaks down, you get out, you slam the door, you say a few choice words that you don't want to say in front of a church secretary. But in that moment, the church secretary walks out of the building and she says, "Hey, I know, looks like you need a tow. You want to come in and call for a tow truck?" This is before everyone had cell phones. And
Hmm.
so I'm talking with the secretary, but as we're waiting for a tow truck, says, "Hey, there's a youth director job opening here. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Sure." So I walk back home, about a mile home, and I'm already dressed for an interview. I walk in the door, and the secretary calls, "Pastor didn't like to talk to you." So I walk back to that church. I have a conversation with the pastor, interview a week later, and I'm hired.
That's
So
hilarious.
yeah,
Oh my
I
gosh.
always tell, yeah, I always tell students, if you don't know what you do in your life, you don't take care of your car, God might have a way of putting something in your life.
That, that might be the greatest call story I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, that's how I got into youth ministry. It was just by a complete, I don't know, not accident. I was looking for something in ministry that probably would have been my goal after having
Hmm.
experienced so much ministry and campus ministry. But it was wonderful to, have a place that was willing to take me on as a 23-year-old doing youth ministry. Um,
Hmm.
and a joy to be in a place that let me just kind of be who I was, and as untrained and unskilled as I was, just to give me the opportunity to preach and teach and lead our young people. Um,
Hmm.
and then from there, I jumped into several other Lutheran congregations and even some Presbyterian congregations, rebuilding youth groups. Met my wife along the way, attended seminary at Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, and we have 3 kids, 6-month-old twins and a 4-year-old boy, and they keep us busy.
Yeah.
Um, but
Did
yeah,
you
but then kind of, very good.
what was that what degree did you get at LSTC? Did you get an MA or an MDiv?
Yeah, MA, Master of Arts in
MA.
Theological
Okay.
Studies. Yep.
Are you deacon then? Are you on a roster or are you not?
Not rostered. Nope.
Okay, okay. The um that would be that's an interesting, I mean, all the denominational connections, how did you wind up, I mean, not because, but why are you Lutheran? What was that? What was the thing that drew you into the Lutheran worldview?
Yeah, it was the campus ministry. I was in the Methodist church for a year and
Mm-hmm.
then kind of went back into the Lutheran world just because that's where I was connected. That's where I knew folks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the theology that I was most comfortable with. And, kind of just wanted to get back into that world after having experienced
Mm-hmm.
youth ministry for a year in a congregation in my hometown, which there's people who do wonderful ministry in their hometown. Not for me. It's one of those
Mm-hmm.
things where I went, hey, I'm not doing ministry with my grade school teachers. It's just different kind of mentality and a different kind of focal
Sure,
point. But
sure.
um, yeah, was in the Presbyterian church as a kind of a reprieve for a little while before
Mm-hmm.
coming back into the Lutheran world. And then I really enjoyed that. I'm glad I had that experience because it gave me fresh eyes coming back into the ELCA. There are
Mm-hmm.
things that every denomination does better. The
Mm-hmm.
expressions, ELCA's got its things that does well. The Presbyterians have their things they do well. And the things that really drew me to the Presbyterian church at that time were they have an actual office for living out the priesthood of all believers with elders and deacons that are lay
Mm-hmm.
folk. Um, they have a book of confessions that is modern, that has modern confessions that speak
Mm-hmm.
to what's happening in the 1960s in the US, what was happening in the 90s, what's happening during World
Mm-hmm.
War II. Those are neat confessions to have as part of a faithful expression. And I can appreciate the
Mm-hmm.
Lutheran versions of those. So don't get me wrong, we have those
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
components, but it's
Mm-hmm.
gives a fresh perspective to how we do church in the ELCA.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so then how did your journey take you from congregational work? And you were in Michigan at that point, still are, but I mean,
Milwaukee, yeah, Milwaukee.
yeah, oh, Milwaukee, I'm sorry. For some
Yeah.
reason I keep thinking, no, for some reason in my head, every time I think of you, I think Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I have no idea
Oh,
why that is, but
it'd be a fun town
Milwaukee,
to live in.
yeah, it's Grand
Yeah.
Rapids, is nice. Um,
Yeah.
so Milwaukee, I apologize.
Mhm.
Uh, so what led you from that into the churchwide position?
Yeah. So went from congregational ministry. I did a year of campus ministry up here in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a multi-denominational effort. And as I was visiting churches and doing a lot of just trying to do some development work for the campus ministry, I was seeing
Mm-hmm.
the need across multiple denominations for mission and direction in youth ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I would step into congregations. Everybody's trying to hire a 10 to 15 hour a week youth director at a poverty wage. And I'm sitting
Mm-hmm.
here going, why don't y'all work together? Y'all can
Mm-hmm.
come together for a campus ministry, but why not for this? And so this campus ministry was really no longer viable in its current state. So I ended up shutting that down um, and looking for a new position. And when I saw this one, I thought, I've been doing a lot of this kind of work at this scale in the Milwaukee area,
Mm-hmm.
um, and wondering what does that look like on a national scale to connect and resource congregations. Um, Not that I have all the answers because I don't have them all, but there are people who do have the answers out there, who do have the resources, who do have the connections. Um, and it was really kind of life-giving to jump from closing something to this great opportunity to see how we can connect and resource in different ways across the denomination.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. The So you started in the ELCA, the churchwide offices. When did you start? Was it
Yeah, October of last
October?
year.
Okay, I thought it was, yeah, in the fall. Um, so you've been in there for 5 months. I mean, what have you seen and observed
Yeah,
so far?
yeah. So we've one of the great things about being in a position like this is I get to listen and hear people's stories, and we've really made that a focal point for youth ministry. We want to hear from our youth leaders. We want to hear from our synod leaders. We want to hear from volunteers, folks who are just doing this out of the kindness of their heart and have a passion for youth ministry. And so, in the midst of that listening, we're hearing that people are begging for connection. It's kind of that
Mm-hmm.
post-COVID thing where we all just want to be reconnected. And I think some of us we just don't know how anymore. If that makes sense too. Post-COVID, we've been so used to being isolated or just connecting with a box on a Zoom call um, that there's a yearning for connection. In one of the synods I was consulting with and talking with a little bit just this last fall, um, I had the audience of 25 youth leaders, and I asked those 25, how many of you have been in your current position? These are all full-time youth leaders of different types, whether lay or ordained. I asked them, of the 25, how many of you have been in your position longer than 3 years? Only 5 people raise their hands. And I asked those 20, how many of you have only been doing youth ministry for less than 3 years? Over half of those folks raised their hands. And this is the first time that those youth leaders had been together in that synod. The youth leaders have been together, period, in that synod for many, many years. But just to see that there's that desire for connection, for resourcing, and I think that's probably a pretty typical across our synods as well. It's not just that one synod that I was visiting, but I'm hearing that from across the denomination, that people feel they are needing that connection. So, as we have synods who are, even if you get together, if synods are going, hey, this doesn't seem fruitful, only getting together once a month, keep doing that. I would like to encourage our synods, say, hey, keep meeting, keep gathering people together. This is very important things that we're doing. And then bring somebody new into the conversation. If you know a new youth director and you're saying, hey, grab them too. Because we're hearing that is the biggest need, is that need to connect and share resources.
Cool. The and it's this last year was your first experience being at Extravaganza. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. I had a great time. I've never been to anything quite. There's something in the Presbyterian Church that's somewhat similar, but it was great to have that many people together, that many youth leaders in one room who just care, or one space to just care about young people, want to learn, want to grow. So it was a fantastic experience, because I've never quite experienced something quite like that as far as continuing ed or anything like that. So it was great to be able to connect with more folks in that setting and say, hey, how's it going?
Sure.
What's working for you? What are you excited about? What's giving you heartache and trouble in your current role? So it was wonderful just to hear those stories.
In the listening that you've done, as we look at like the work that needs to happen, congregationally mostly, but even across the broader church. You talked about the need for the youth workers to connect, which I mean, that's why the network exists, right? I mean, so you're preaching to the choir, but in terms of the work with young people, what are you hearing as being kind of the needs that the leaders have?
Yeah, the biggest need, I think we're hearing this everywhere: mental health. How are we caring for the mental and spiritual needs of our young people? We hear that over and over again. Even our youth are listing that as their number one. But I think number two to that is opportunities for youth to take the lead. So it's, how do we create opportunities and systems that have maybe congregations have been around 100 years or even 20 years, that have a kind of a set understanding of what youth ministry is, and kind of open the floodgates a bit for youth to take the lead, whether that's liturgists or being on the council and actually have a voice on that council, or if it's creating new entities in the synod for our youth to lead. I'm hearing that as a kind of a close second need behind mental health, is how are we empowering young people to really take the lead? How can we make room in our congregations to do that? I think it's a both and kind of question. It's not just creating a role for them, but it's also making room and space for their voices to be listened to and empowered.
That's great. So if you think ahead, let's say 5 years, 5 to 10 years, somewhere in that range. I mean, if you were to look at the landscape then, what do you hope for?
Yeah, I think I go back to that connection piece. I would hope that, this post-COVID reality, that if not in a synod level, at least some kind of a regional or even a local level, that our youth leaders are connecting with one another, that the experienced and 5 years of experience in youth ministry is experienced, that our experienced youth leaders are shepherding and mentoring new people to the field, because that's what we need. We need more disciples who are looking to grow more young disciples. That's the only way we're going to be a younger, more diverse and vibrant congregation, is if we empower more and more people to take the lead in those fields. So I think my big hope, and that, in new ways of doing it too. I was connecting a couple synods. There's a couple synods looking to do confirmation online, so they have a critical mass of students gathered together. And so as I'm hearing those kind of folks saying, hey, how can we connect you together? You're looking to do this in Southeastern Synod. You're looking to do this in Oklahoma, Arkansas, or whatever. How do we connect you? So you both can learn from one another as well. So seeing that kind of interconnectedness across the denomination would be a huge goal as well. I'd say we realized it in 5 years if we see those kind of efforts across multiple
Mhm.
landscapes, whether that's synod, regional, local, even across the denomination.
Sure. No, that's great. It's good. Um, working, let me frame it this way. If you wanted to communicate something to the people that are working in congregations about um, the ways that you can be supportive of them in their work, what would you want to communicate, or how can you help them?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, number one, my first role is to be your advocate, and
Mhm.
that means I want to cheer you on. I'm going to celebrate you. I'm going to try and do my best to take away those things that aren't barriers on a denominational scale that keep you from doing what you need to
Mhm.
do. That's what it means to be an advocate. But second, being a hub or a place for resources or connection. Like I said, connecting two folks looking to do online confirmation. You know,
Mhm.
um, I would hope that I'd be that kind of resource where if someone says, "Hey, we want to really focus on mental health," I can say, "Hey, there's another person looking to do that, and they've got some resources right here."
Mhm.
So it's hard to do on a denominational scale when you're looking at so many different leaders who are volunteer, lay, ordained, on and on. But can we
Mhm.
have a hub of connection and communication on a synod level
Sure.
that really can help disseminate information, can resource others, and connect folks?
Mhm. Are there ways that people in congregations can be helpful or supportive of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, share your stories. I think that's the biggest thing. I think you have that as well in the network. We want to hear those stories of
Mhm.
youth ministry that are maybe different, new approaches, or maybe tried approaches that are working in really wonderful ways. There's a pastor in Iowa, senior pastor in Iowa. She has an associate pastor on her staff, and she is the youth director, the senior pastor, and that makes for a different kind of approach to youth ministry. Or hearing of ministries that are really targeting neighborhood folks. There's a church in New Jersey that's really doing some great work in the Nigerian community. Um, so we want to hear those stories. We want to share those stories because
Mhm.
you might not be able to replicate those stories in your congregation or your setting necessarily, but there's something inspiring about hearing how folks are doing ministry in new and exciting ways that maybe you could replicate in some way.
Sure.
But
Or at least the
those sharing of
principles.
stories.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, it's going to look different in every context, but you can take the ideals
Yeah.
and train. Those are transferable, so that's good. Um, Good. Are there other things that you'd want folks to know about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that one. um,
And you don't have to. I'm just trying to, make
yeah,
sure there's things that
yeah,
you want to cover.
yeah. I'm still trying to define my role. Really, it's a big part of it, and that's
All
fine.
right.
That's part of the job. Um,
Well,
I can't really think of anything.
let me ask you one more. So what,
Mhm.
one of your areas is the core leadership team and the summit. What do you
Yeah,
envision moving ahead for those kinds of initiatives?
yeah. So the youth core leadership has been a fantastic opportunity for young people to kind of come
Mhm.
and experience leadership and lead an event.
Mhm.
But we're looking to really take that to a different level. So how do we
Mhm.
empower our regional folks doing this kind of work to do it in a bigger way? To
Mhm.
do it in a way that maybe empowers more young people? How do we go to our camps and say, how are you empowering youth leaders? Not necessarily just get youth at camp, but how are you empowering youth to take leadership in our synods? Even looking at the church-wide assembly and how are we equipping and empowering our young people to be voices in those
Mhm.
arenas? So, the summit and the youth core leadership model they're probably done at this point. But
Mhm.
how can we create something new that still lives into that ideal of youth leading
Mhm. Nope, I
um,
think that's good.
in multiple spaces, not just one event and not just for 1 year, but
Right.
across the denomination in multiple arenas?
Mhm. No, I think that makes sense. The It always felt like putting all the eggs in that basket seemed a little limited.
Yeah, and even looking at in the future gathering cycles, how can we get youth helping have more leadership and input in what the youth
Hmm.
gathering looks like? We're
Hmm.
going to need youth voices because if we're trying to create programming on a church-wide level for youth people, for people who are youth, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard and having your blindfolds on, right? You don't know what
Hmm.
you're trying to hit unless you have youth in the room saying, "Hey, this is what we need. This is what we want."
Hmm.
So even looking at advocacy as a place for youth to kind of speak up for their peers
Hmm.
in a way that's more fulfilling, and rather than just a bunch of adults trying to figure out, "Hey, this is what we think youth will like."
Sure, sure. Oh, that's good. All right, here are my fast questions at the end. Ready?
Sure.
Um, all right. So, what's your favorite food?
Tacos
Excellent, excellent
every
choice.
time.
And your favorite movie?
I'm gonna go back to my childhood and say The Empire Strikes Back because I don't have time to watch movies. I do not have time to watch movies right
No,
now.
you got three kids. You got nothing
Yeah,
for that. Is there a show that you don't miss?
I'm gonna be a nerd again. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. That's just been a good one.
I love that show.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm a lifelong Star Trek person, so you just went up like 8 points in my list. My wife is in the other room right now, rolling her eyes even as we speak. So, um, uh, who's your NFL team?
Kansas City Chiefs. We're having
Okay.
a good old time.
I would say congratulations. Are you a morning person or a night person?
I'm just an awake person. I just whenever I can get sleep, I'll take it. But
Again,
coffee, on the other hand, all day long.
I would say three kids. Yeah, you just take it what you can get. I get that too. So good. All right. Those are all the things I had. Were there other kinds of things you wanted to share or wanted to include in this that you can
No,
think
I think
of?
it was pretty good. Yeah. Is
All right. Good.
that
Well,
helpful enough, Todd?
oh yeah, yeah. No, it's great. And
Okay.
it's not a long piece. I mean, I'm going to wind up cutting a
Yeah.
lot of this down to make it fit into basically, the journal we try to keep to. Well, it varies, and these are maybe a little bit longer, but a typical what we call a feature story in the journal now would be 1,000 to 1,200 words. So it's not long.
Sure.
In the digital world, that's long.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, so it'll take a little time to trim that, and but after it goes to the editing process, then I'll send it your way to take a look at,
Okay.
and from there. So thanks, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else you need from me?
Um, no, I actually one question for you, if it's okay, if you have
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Um, have you given any other thought to, you mentioned at the network board thing at the extravaganza, have
Hmm.
you given more thought to what opening up the network might look like, or
Opening up the
in a
network,
new way?
referring to what
Like
part?
like maybe having or opening up a little bit more for like a free, I think you could said something about or even opening a margin list or something like that you mentioned.
Oh yeah, we had talked about like I would love someday. I mean, this
Yeah.
conversation still kind of lives at the philosophical level.
Sure, sure.
I refer to it as the public radio model. Everything is just out there, and
Yeah.
people give to support it. That's the thing, and I think that's a conversation we need to continue to have. We've actually opened up a lot more stuff, but not kind of everything at this point.
Yeah.
And I think that's a board conversation because it represents a philosophical shift
Definitely.
for
Oh,
us.
definitely.
And
Definitely.
I think the idea being, well, it's just a matter of, okay, are we really going to trust that this can fly?
Yeah.
And part of it is, we're gonna like we just the network or the New Orleans extravaganza just beat the crap out of us financially, which we knew it was going to because New Orleans is an
Hmm.
expensive city to be in, and we had some
Yeah.
things we hadn't anticipated with the weather and with
Yeah.
shipping
Right.
materials didn't
Right.
get there, so we had to get stuff there and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're going to take it on the chin this time. And um, and we just have to figure that out. So part of it's just a matter of, do we feel like
Hmm.
we can just step into that sort of a world or not, which I think will
Sure.
be a broader conversation. My guess is we have to reorganize the board a little bit now because Dan's term finished, so we'll need to have a new chairperson and get those kinds of things going and kind of set some goals. We want to step into some strategic planning. I think this will be a part of that. So my guess is we might not make a determination on that for
Right.
6 months to a year. I think it could be
Yeah.
because we we only meet every 6 weeks or so. Um,
Hmm.
but uh, but I think that needs to be a conversation I think we should have.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just curious. I know you mentioned it a couple times now. I'm like, oh, I
Mhm.
wonder where, and I know it's probably a board thing. I kind of guessed that, but that
Yeah,
is a big
yeah.
shift. Um, but then I ask you a couple questions, just real quick. Is Symbol pretty much housed under the network financially?
Well, sort of, yeah, sort of. Well, financially, yes, we're their fiscal agent.
Okay.
And so, and that was a determination that was made probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Um, So Symbol, Symbol exists separately from the network. I actually think it wouldn't be a bad thing for it to be organizationally tucked under the network more. Like, because it really is, if the network is a network of youth ministry leaders,
Sure.
that's what Symbol is. And I think we can provide more support. We could put they could have a web page on our website. They could have, and I actually had a good conversation with Becky Cole yesterday because she's going to do some data work for us. That conversation I had with Symbol about using the database. She's going to take that ball and run with it and try to see what she can make happen. And that's going to be, the thing is every synod is independent, so they can decide to participate or not participate. The money that comes to support Symbol, it was decided, like I said, 8 to 10 years ago, to put that in the network's accounts. And so when they have things, we write the checks. The basic reason for that was we can do it much faster than the ELCA could.
Sure.
I know
ELCA, we do give that money for Symbol and network, but I was just curious.
Yep. And actually, one of the questions I was going to ask you at some point is just to check and see where we're at with that. The checks don't come through me. They go to our treasurer and such. And I can find out when we've received things, but there's also a lot of different checks that come between the extravaganza that come in and out from the ELCA. So I just wanted to check and see where we're at in terms of that schedule.
I was actually having a conversation yesterday. With somebody.
Yeah.
So there should be something coming. So good.
Yeah, I was going to just ask because the schedule shifted a couple different times, and sometimes it's only because people forgot to send checks. I mean, that kind of a deal. Like one year, I think we discovered we were like a year behind. So, which is, we can live with that. That's fine. But I think, like I said, this year, we're just going to, things are coming out of this extravaganza. We're just going to be tighter financially. And so we just need to be aware and keep track. So if at some point you wouldn't mind checking on when the checks have been sent and where we're at in that would probably be helpful for me to know.
Our new administrator was asking, hey, where's this? What's this for? Because she had last year's data and they changed the account numbers, of course, because that's what the ELCA does. They change things and don't tell us. You can edit that out. No, I'm kidding.
We're past the interview now, so
I know. So I'll ask Maisha where that's at this point. She was asking yesterday, what's this and where's it coming from? And it's like, well, let me do some digging and figure out what those numbers are. And there should be something coming soon, but I'll let you know, and I'll check with Maisha when those get approved. Once you approve a grant, then it's got to go through. We produce grants out of the budget basically, and then it's got to go through a whole review process. So it'll probably be a month or two,
and that's why
after we start that.
That's why Network works as the fiscal agent. So because we can just write checks. It's pretty quick and pretty easy for us.
It's funny because I can get reimbursed so quickly, but if I need to send money somewhere, it's like, goodness, why does this take so long?
Right. Exactly. And there's been different things, and some of it's been a little bit underground, not financial stuff, but like I remember when Heidi was in her role with the gathering, she used us, and I think Tammy's done that a little bit too. Like if there's information they need to put out quickly, send it to us and we can put it out, because if it has to go up, it has to go through the review process from, the communications people or the advancement people or whoever it is. And I remember one time Heidi told me it takes, like, if she writes a paragraph that needs to be sent out, it takes like 2 to 3 weeks to get approved. I said, send it to me. I'll have it out this afternoon. So same thing for you. If there's things that you need to disseminate quickly, just let me know and we can put stuff out pretty fast. And part of it's just, it's not that we're completely trying to avoid the system, but we're just trying to make it work. Sometimes we got to move a little faster than what the ELCA can do. And we all know that.
Well, I'm finding that out very quickly with just this clear confirmation curriculum we're trying to put together. It's like, goodness, just even trying to put a curriculum together. It's, all the levels, and then going, if we can avoid any of those levels, let's do it. So let's create a web page that's separate from the ELCA, because that creates a whole lot of, it eliminates a lot of levels of checks and balances. So I've already experienced that quite a bit. But beyond financially, is there anything else I can? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't think so. I remember Catherine and I were co-team leaders for the gathering the year that we did practice discipleship, which is what eventually morphed into Synod Day. I think that was in 2009 or 2012. 2012. It was in 2012. And I remember we were going to have all the synods gathering, and we're going to have their bishops lead worship and serve communion. And so we thought that's great. We'll have the bishops do it, and that'll be fun. And then we got a piece of hate mail from the worship department in the ELCA that said all the presiders, you have to send us the names of the presiders because they have to be approved. And I was like, they're all ELCA pastors. We've already approved them. What do you have to? No, we got to send. So we had to send a list of all the bishops. They're bishops.
Yeah.
We had to send a list of the bishops. And there are a few bishops who couldn't be there. So then they had different pastors stepping in to take that role. We had a list of probably 58 bishops and 7 other pastors who are on the roster, who've all done, and we had to send that to the worship department so they can send us a note back saying these people have been approved to lead worship. Really?
Yeah.
And that's sort of.
Oh, we ran the same thing at the Youth Ministry Summit in Chicago. It's like, this is ridiculous. It's like we were told the day of when we arrived, it's like, oh, you need to make sure we need your worship bulletin. I got to approve it. It's like, oh my goodness, really?
Right.
You have an ELCA pastor who wrote the worship service. Why do you need this approved?
Right. Well, my favorite, we actually did a board meeting once in Chicago at the churchwide offices, and it was just total kind of spur of the moment. We finished this. We had a really good meeting. It was really in depth, really intense, really focused. We felt like just it had been gone great. We wanted to end the meeting. Hey, can we do communion to end the meeting? Well, sure. We got 5 pastors on the board or whatever. So I said, I wonder if they got some bread and wine. So I went and asked somebody, and they said, you got to go talk to the worship department. They have the bread and the wine. So I on this whatever floor. So I went down there, talked to somebody, and they said, well, sure, but you got to write a little form, fill out this form, and then hand it to me. And then the bread and the wine is downstairs in the sacristy. You can go down and get it, use it. Okay, great. So I went downstairs, found the bread, found the wine, went up to the meeting room. We did communion. It's great. I get home 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the ELCA that said that I had been approved to lead communion for this group. I'm like, hey, that was 2 weeks ago. I needed to be approved. I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah. The things we get so up about, it just drives me bonkers.
I know. I think it's hilarious. Anyway, that's all I got. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.
For your time. And I'll get this to you probably in a week or two, ballpark. Okay. It might be a little longer than that before it gets to. I think our copy editor's got 1 or 2 other articles in the pipeline. This will probably actually come out in probably a month, would be my guess. I know there's an article coming up about trauma preparation in 2 weeks, and then I think there's supposed to be that third part of that interview with the vice president of the ELCA. It's a 3-part deal. I don't know where that's at in the pipeline, so it'll be yours will probably be in 4 weeks or 6 would be my guess. So
yeah, it's probably good to get a separation between Jess and mine.
Right.
Similar kind of goals and such, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but you're much more the nerd, so I appreciate that. Although she does like Marvel movies, I learned that, which
she does.
Respect. So.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. All right. You take good care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. You too.
Bye bye.